if you're watching UConn basketball when they're on Fox, you're seeing a lot of the bracket reports from this guy, Mike DeCourcy, who I'm excited to have join us to talk a little bracketology today. So, Mike, thanks so much for hopping on.
Oh, happy to do it, Jared. Absolutely.
So I've got to say, like the past couple years have been relatively boring from a UConn bracketology standpoint in terms of talking about seeding and where things are going to go. But that looks to change this year. So excited to have you on to dive into things a little bit. So I guess let's just start with this. I know in the most recent bracket you've got out on Fox Sports, you've got UConn as a 7. I know that was before the loss to St. John's on Friday night. So just kind of give us a high level overview of where you've got this UConn team right now.
Well, they're in a tricky position because, first of all, you've got the specter of the 8-9 game sitting right below them, and that's always undesirable. You certainly don't want to be in that circumstance. And the traffic ahead of them, the strength of this bracket,
Yeah.
as it stands now, and it could change, but the strength is in that 5-6 range. It's where there's a lot of teams that look very much like 5 or 6 seeds. Some of the teams on the 7 line could easily be on the 5 or 6 line, and that's where there's a difficulty for UConn to break forward into that. And then the second problem that the Huskies have is that their metrics, especially the record metrics, the results metrics, are really problematic for them. They barely have the Huskies as a tournament team, which vexes me a little bit because they have wins that say, of course, we're a tournament team. Gonzaga, Marquette, Texas, etc., Baylor. Those are the kinds of wins that certainly they're a tournament team. And that's why they're in. And that's why I and others will have them in that range between 7 and 8. But it's hard to say, okay, if they win X number of games down the stretch against quality opposition or did really well in New York, et cetera, that they could climb, because how much can they affect those metrics over the course of the next several weeks? That's going to be a real challenge for them. As always, the best thing to do is win as many games as you can against the best possible opposition, and then worry about where it falls.
Yeah, I'm curious, given that strength of that range in that 5 to 6 seed, what do you kind of see as the potential ceiling for this UConn team? And then based on some of the metrics you talked about, what is the floor? Like, would you say there's an actual chance that this team, if they do, lose another couple games this season, are really truly on the bubble?
I don't think they'll ever quite find that range because you should see how it looks on the bubble. I mean, like SMU is in my field. I think they were on Friday. They haven't beaten anything looks like an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah.
They don't look anything. They haven't beaten anybody that looks like a 1955 NCAA tournament team, let alone 2025. And yet they're in because there's just no one else. I just can't find teams that belong. That's why I keep kind of choking on the whole idea of them elevating the number of teams in the tournament to 72 or 76 or
Yeah.
whatever, because there just aren't that many teams out there that belong. It's just it doesn't reflect reality. As far as what the ceiling would be for the Huskies, as I look at their schedule that remains, they still have 3 games against rock solid NCAA tournament teams, and 2 of those are on the road. So for a team in the Huskies position right now, those present not so much difficulty because you're not really trying to win the league at this point.
Yeah.
What they provide is opportunity because you're trying to dig yourself up from the 7-8 range to a higher level. I would say they'd have to win 2 out of those 3 at this point to be thinking about crossing over into the 6 range. I think they have to win 2 out of those 3 because there's only 3 out
Yeah.
of a remaining, I believe, 8 games. You probably have to win those, and then I don't think they can afford to lose any of the games to teams that aren't in that cohort, that 3-team cohort, Creighton, St. John's, and Marquette. You could maybe drop the Providence game, but that wouldn't hurt you relative to falling into the double digit seed level. if you won the others and did the two of three. But if you want to do that too, if you want to get up to the sixth level, I think you have to win two of those three and not drop any of the others.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts because it seems like the past couple years in particular, the committee hasn't necessarily put a ton of value on your results in the conference tournament. Is that how you're seeing things just from your perspective over these past couple years?
Honestly, Jared, I think that's overstated because what people sometimes miss is how much data they already have by the time we get there.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to move much because you've already built a library
Yeah.
and one more book. And even if it's, I mean, like if it's a classic like Nickel Boys or Catch 22, yeah, okay, they'll notice that. But if it's just a really good bestseller kind of book, that it's going to be hard for them to change it much. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's that they don't value that. It's that you've already established a lot of what you are. And I think what the reason that perception develops is that now there are a lot of people who do what I do. I guess really it would be more accurately phrased, a lot of people now who do what Joe did once upon a time all by himself. And now there's a lot of us. So everybody, and I mean, I'm not bragging when I say this because we're good at this. Like we get really close to what they do. It's not identical. A year ago, we all missed one team. We all had Virginia out and Oklahoma in. As a group, I think it was out of 200 online brackets at the Matrix, it was something like 170 of us had Oklahoma in and Virginia out, something like that. So we're good at this, and people who follow either a specific individual, myself, or Jerry Palm, or Joe, or someone else on who's on the web, if you follow us, you're going to get a pretty decent idea of where your team stands.
Yeah.
So by the time they get to New York, it's hard to move it much. But it's not that they're not paying attention, and it's not that those games don't matter. But where those games really probably matter most is at the elimination stage.
Yeah.
You go back to, I think it was 22 when Butler played Xavier on the first day of the tournament. May have been 23. I'm mixing my years a little bit. And on that Wednesday, and everybody in the building knew, and everybody who do what I do, who does what I do, knew, and everybody in the committee room knew, although they wouldn't say it out loud, that absolutely that was an elimination game for Xavier, and
Yeah.
they didn't get it done. They had it in their hands, fumbled it away, lost, and they were done. And that's where the for that conference tournament week, it really does have a consequence.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. It kind of thinking that you kind of are what you are at that point in the season. Hey, you win, you beat Georgetown in the quarterfinals. Man, maybe it doesn't really do too much for your resume versus going up and beating St. John's on their court in the Big East tournament there. One thing that UConn fans in particular have kind of gotten spoiled by, especially last year, was getting these protected paths a bit. Where last year they went Brooklyn to Boston, and I know the kind of the theme this year was hopefully getting Providence to Newark. Based on where they're looking like they're going to fall in terms of a seed line, does it now look like you kind of have to put that dream aside a little bit and hey, they're going to just get sent where they get sent at this point?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Now, I mean, if they're a seven, and what you have to remember is that if you're a seven, you're probably not going to go to Providence because none of the twos are going to want to. None of the likely twos at this stage
Yeah.
are going to want to go to Providence, because that would be out of the way for them. If as I was working on my bracket for tomorrow, those they're Providence is kind of a out of the way destination for a lot of teams. Now, St. John's might be one that could eventually climb up into playing into Providence. If they're a three or a four, they might get the opportunity to play in Providence. But if they get there, then that limits the ability of UConn to get there a little bit because they obviously would not be matched in the same grouping
Yeah.
as St. John's would. So that's that. So you kind of have to just figure, get in, hope that it's a reasonably close place. But that's really how I guess the administrators think they want to be in the closest spot. But when you're a fan, you want, hey, don't send me to Auburn's region,
Yeah.
or don't match me against Duke. I don't want to play against Cooper Flag or whatever. Those are the keys for a team in UConn's position, which whatever they're seated, 7 or 8, or 6 or whatever, they're dangerous. I mean,
Yeah.
we all know they're better than their resume is right now as a basketball team. That happens sometimes, but they're in a better position. Like if you think about Xavier, that's a team that like everybody in the country knows they're better than their resume,
Yeah.
but their resume says they're not going. So at least UConn's, while their resume's better, not as good as their team, at least they know their resume's probably getting them in.
Looking to add some local flavor to your lineup? Martin Rosals is the MVP of your game day spread and a slam dunk for any occasion. Proudly made in hard-hit New Britain, their famous kielbasa and hot dogs have been a fan favorite for over 96 years. You can find their products in grocery stores across the state or have them delivered directly to your home court, coast to coast, via martinrosal.com. Take your taste buds to the championship and go support a UConn fan-owned business. I'm curious because year in and year out, you always see, teams that have players miss an extended period of time, and the committee somewhat takes that into account. How do you see the impact of Liam McNeeley, who missed, I think it was 8 games, basically the whole month of January, when UConn did struggle a little bit in some of these Big East games? Is it something that's just kind of automatically taken into consideration, or is it, hey, if UConn goes now and wins, the next 7 or 8 games they have, then you say, hey, he really did have an impact, and you kind of weigh it a little differently there?
Well, I don't know how many games he missed and what their record was in those games, but let's just say it was 5-3.
Mhm.
So they are that team with Liam out. Well, if they go 5-3 with him, the committee's going to say that's who you are.
Yeah.
Then you're basically haven't changed any dynamic about your team now that he's back. Now he may make a difference in subsequent games and get you farther, et cetera, in March Madness, but in terms of your seeding, you have to now go out and show that he has made you better. He has made you different. And don't and what you have to remember about this, especially in a team like UConn's situation, is like the committee isn't worried about UConn so much in that
Mhm.
sense. Like they're not thinking that, oh gosh, it's not fair to UConn to give them a 7 seed if they have Liam McNeeley in there and they win 8 of their next 9 games or whatever. They're worried about the team that's 2 or 3
Mhm.
because that team has earned an advantaged ride. And playing a UConn that gets Liam back and wins 8 of their next 9 games, they're clearly not a natural 7 seed. So that's where the concern is. They're not going to probably seed UConn at 2 or 3. I mean, that's a pretty far climb,
Yeah.
but they're going to worry about the teams that have earned that all the way through the year without that disruption. And so that's why I mentioned before about the Creighton, Seton Hall, and Marquette games, and just taking care of business in the others is so important for UConn because if you do that, one, you build your resume, and two, you probably get a little bit of a boost because you got Liam back and you're a different team with him.
Yeah. As you look at this UConn resume from a committee and a seeding standpoint, what matters more to them? Say like an early season loss to, Colorado or a Dayton, a team that's most likely not an NCAA tournament team, or a win like they had on the road at Marquette.
Yeah, big wins are the first criteria, and
Mhm.
like if once you get past the metrics and how that sort of how they sort of put you into a particular pocket, then when they start to drill down, I mean, I sometimes I get frustrated by some of the mythology that exists out there. I mean, last week someone was questioning my seeding, I think, of Illinois. And I said, well, Illinois lost to 3 teams that aren't even in my field. And remember, I'm thinking of my field as the committee would think of their field.
Yeah.
And the person said, well, that's not a thing. That doesn't matter. And I'm like, of course it matters. If you're losing, he said, well, they were quad one losses. Look, the committee knows they can see. Okay, yeah, it's a quad one loss, so they're not going to really punish you for it, but they're going to factor it in. If you're out there losing to teams that are not significant, they're going to have they're going to take that into account. It's going to damage your resume. But if you're also countering that by beating teams on the road like Marquette, and then as I mentioned before, what you have up ahead of you,
Yeah.
Creighton and St. John's. I mean, if you can win that game in the Garden, if you can go to Omaha and win, that's going to make them believe in you. That's going to make them respect you because, again, it's about the advantage team. If you can beat St. John's and Creighton on the road, well, they don't want to put you on the floor with Tennessee. That's not fair to Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's the mentality that you have to think about. And so big wins are most important. Bad losses are not great for you, but they if there's a pendulum, it's
Mhm.
much more weighted toward consequential wins than it is unimpressive losses.
All right, that should give UConn fans a little bit of comfort here as they look down the stretch here. Just diving into the Big East quickly as a whole. I know last year everyone felt like maybe St. John's got a little bit of the short end of the stick, not getting in, and I think that worries people for kind of the perception of the league and how that kind of looks heading into this season and this selection. How do you view the Big East right now? It kind of seems like at most we're probably looking at a four bid league here.
Yeah, I think that's probably where it'll end up. And I think that what the Big East is, the situation they're in is they are in a full NIL world now, and they have to figure out a way to navigate that across the board. And certain places have navigated that well, and certain places have navigated that well with certain players. Creighton keeping Ryan Kalkbrenner for 5 years would be an example of that. They did a really good job. St. John's bringing in Kadari Richmond and what a difference he's made and being able to put that roster together. Davon Smith bringing him in. They have managed it well, but it's not been across the board something that they are ahead of the game. Now, the world could change again by the time we're talking next
Yeah.
February with the revenue share world. And does that mean NIL is out or is it still in and rev share is just a part of the equation? They don't even know yet. And everybody's trying to build a roster for 2025, 26, and not anyone
Yeah.
out there knows 100% how that is going to break down. So it's a difficult thing to navigate. But I think the great basketball that UConn has played over the last couple of years has been really important to the Big East in making sure that they stay attached to that group while they figure it out, while
Mhm.
everybody figures it out, but while they figure out how to be as effective as some of the other leagues are. The other leagues obviously have football and the attention that brings and the revenue that brings, and in some cases, the distraction that brings from the basketball mission. But it generally has tended to make it an easier ride for those big time football programs. So that's the Big East challenge. And like I said, it's not really been a problem at UConn. It's not been a problem at St. John's since Rick got there and their big donor stepped up. But it's a problem at Seton Hall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite obvious. It's a challenge at Butler. I think Xavier is still trying to get ahead of it, but I think they will. But all of those places, Villanova, I don't think their problem is necessarily been in terms of the challenges of funding it so much as putting it in the right places.
Mhm.
So all of that comes into it, and there are going to be years when great programs have tough years. Like Carolina now, they
Yeah.
got the roster wrong, and this is where they are, and that's going to happen more in this era than it's ever happened before. But it also isn't permanent. It's less permanent than it's ever been.
Right, because next year you go build a whole new roster and
Exactly.
and
You
go
don't
from there.
have to fire your coach now because things aren't working. If you think your coach is really good and it's just not, the roster isn't working, you can go out and fix the roster. Whereas before, if your coach might be good and you might believe in him, but the players weren't quite there and your fans are mad and you got to make a change just to keep it going and try to get recruits interested. So I think it's a different world now, and I do think that within the next couple of years, the Big East is going to get totally ahead of the game and back to where they were as a whole league 3 or 4 years ago.
It's promising to hear. So hopefully, I know everyone who's a Big East fan is hoping for the same. I've got to just quickly touch on just a couple of the other Connecticut teams you have in your projected bracket. We know Yale last year went off and pulled off the upset over Auburn. Is that Yale team a team you're seeing as one that could potentially be a little pesky out for someone in the tournament who gets them this year?
Definitely. I think that for Yale, the challenge is to try to get into that 12 line. Some people have them as a 12. I've had them as a 13. It's pretty close between them and Akron. And of course, there's always the possibility that like Irvine lost
Yeah.
over the weekend to UC San Diego. San Diego's also a 12 level, 13 level type team. So if one of those two doesn't make it and Yale wins the Ivy, Yale's an easy 12. There won't be enough traffic to keep them out of it. And I think that being in that spot, it's just been historically much easier for a 12 to win than it has for a 13. So
Yeah.
to me, that's the goal for them. You one, win the league, and two, win it in a fashion that gets you up on that 12 line.
Yeah, and the other team you've got from the state in the bracket is Central Connecticut, who has not been in the tournament in a while. But one thing that I like about what you've got in your bracket is usually you see that Northeast Conference team in the play-in game in Dayton. But not only do you not have them in that, you've got them as a 15 seed. What do you like about that Central team?
Well, I think first of all, they put together a season to date that metrically stands up better than some of the teams that I have on my 16 line. Their results metrics are fairly impressive. Their predictive metrics, Ken Palm, et cetera, not so much. They're down at probably close to 16 level, but the results metrics, I think in part because of the St. Joe's win, the
Yeah,
UMass win, I think that has really helped them. They're in a really good position in two of the three results metrics, and I think it would be hard for the committee to punish them unless if they get that conference tournament and win the Northeast, unless something odd happened in some of the other leagues, I think it would be hard for them to punish a team with their results metrics by putting them in a 16 seed, let alone put
yeah.
them in Dayton and make them play in the first four.
All right. Well, I think you've given some words here that'll kind of calm all of the fan bases here in the state who are looking at where their teams might fall in the bracket here. So, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on and walking through this with us once again this year, and look forward to seeing how the brackets continue to grow over the next couple months or the next month, really, and get ready for March. So, thanks so much.
All right, Jared, enjoy the rest of the season and look forward to March.